Welcome everyone to Global Purpose Speaks. I'm your host, DJ Taz Rashid, and I'm a musician who travels to mindful festivals and events throughout the whole world. And one of my passions is to have conversations with transformational leaders, learn about their unique missions and how they're changing the world. This talk series is created in partnership with Global Purpose Movement, which is a collective of change makers convening and co-creating in our Earth's current shift towards a world that's working for everyone. And today we're speaking with Andrea Livingston, who has been at IONS, Institute of Noetic Sciences, for 5 years and is currently serving as the Community Engagement Coordinator. Her work with IONS, as well as her academic background in Consciousness and Transformative Studies, informs her deep passion for education and exploration of consciousness and its applications for positive societal change. Andrea, welcome. How are you?
Beautiful. I'm great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm so happy we're able to connect finally in our meeting here. And
Definitely.
and these are, as I was mentioning, these are kind of short talks, so I want to just jump right in. For those
Great.
out there who are not familiar with IONS, can you tell us a little bit what is IONS exactly?
Absolutely. Yeah. So ION stands for, as you said, the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And whenever I tell people that, the very first question is, what is noetic?
Exactly.
And so, yeah, noetic means like an inner knowing or an inner wisdom. It comes from nous, this inner gnosis, right? This inner knowing. And Institute of Noetic Sciences was actually founded by Edgar Mitchell, who was an astronaut and the sixth man to walk on the moon.
Wow.
And he has some incredible books about his journey and his story, but he spent his whole life preparing to go to the moon and to do this journey. And one of the most incredible things happened to him while he was in space that was unexpected, was actually on the way back from the moon. He got the window seat in the space capsule, and the capsule was just turning around and around, and, he could see the sun and the moon and the earth. And it was the first time as humans that we got an overall picture of the earth, and seeing this tiny blue-green marble floating in space. He had this profound sense, he called it an epiphany. He had this epiphany of our interconnectedness, our fundamental interconnectedness, and kind of this order and this divinity shining through everything. So it kind of sent him off on this whole other inner journey, rather than, going to outer space. He's like, well, that's great. And there's so much potential just lying here within our own consciousness.
Inner space, in our inner space, right?
In our inner space. Yeah. So from outer space to inner space.
Yeah. That's got to be a book out there. Outer space to inner space. I don't know.
Oh, totally. Maybe you'll write it. I don't know. Yeah. So that was his mission. And he started reading spiritual texts and trying to discover, what happened to me out there and how can we learn more about it. And so him being an engineer and a scientist and a mathematician his whole life, he wanted to apply some objective ways to study this inner experience. So he founded Institute of Noetic Sciences, which is frontier science into consciousness. So we can use, hook people up to EEGs. We can measure, the body, brain states. We can measure subjective experiences through surveys. So there's many, many different ways to study consciousness and extended human capacities. So yeah, IONS has a really rich, about now, I think 44-year history of people looking, both honoring the noetic experiences, these inner knowings of like, I don't have to read a book to tell me that I had this experience, that we're all interconnected. And yet I want to understand and discover more about what that is and how that works. And so it's just this exploring ground for people, scientists, educators, and then people in the community to say, hey, I think there's something more here than, the world, the current paradigm of science telling us that we're all, separate meaningless particles, and it's like, wait, there's something else happening here, and we want to study it. So yeah, that's a little bit about how we started.
Yeah, that's great. I always people always ask me, like when I share about ions, like what is ions? I always tell them they're putting the science behind the meditation and these things that we explain to people where there's there's no science behind it. I mean, this is the organization that's doing the science, the research, the random number generators, whatever, that's putting this stuff in place so that you guys are doing some major work. Would you say that's for person that's off the street, that's kind of how I explain to them? They're like, oh, that makes sense. I get it.
Totally. And, it's cool to look back of what we were doing, we funded some of the very first meditation studies, and now, there's meditation studies everywhere. We were some of the first people to look at the mind-body healing connection, and now, that's everywhere. So it's really expanding in a big way, and having some science and some data and some exploration behind it helps people to understand it and incorporate it and get it into, hospitals. If we say, oh, there's all this research on how healing affects the body, and then it can be picked up in a bigger way. So
with that, I just want to look at you for a second. How did you get involved with ions on your path, and how did that connection happen?
Totally. I studied psychology in my undergrad, and was really interested not only in what's this deeper sense of transformation that's possible, something like what Edgar Mitchell had, this profound experience and deeper meaning.
You're like, do I have to go to space for that?
Yeah, I know. Can I do that here? What's up? Yeah, exactly. And so it led me to study consciousness and transformative studies for my master's degree, which is just interdisciplinary, looking at Eastern tradition, Western traditions, what do we actually know about the human being and the psyche, and how we can transform and move more into our potential as humans, which just fits so perfectly with what IONS was doing. So I found the work of IONS and began an internship here a little over 5 years ago. Cool. And there's something about bringing our experience together with the science. I mean, it's incredibly powerful to have that foundation to really explore from. It called me here, and I've been delighted to be here ever since.
That's great. And we speak a lot about societal change and human consciousness, and whenever I've been in meetings with IONS or with Green Heart Transforms or Global Purpose Movement, how would you say, if you, from your standpoint, from your example, from your voice, how would you say IONS is or the work that IONS is doing, how is that serving the shift that's going on right now in human consciousness and societal change, even with current conditions right now? What makes IONS unique in that capacity? Because there's a lot of organizations doing transformation work, and what makes IONS unique in that?
Yeah. A couple things kind of pop up as you ask that question. One is that, one of the epiphanies also that Edgar had when he was on the moon, he looked down and saw that there was no boundaries on the earth. He's like, oh, that's human constructed. That's something in our own human consciousness that we created. Yeah. And this idea of separation. So that's actually at the root of many of our problems. So we can work on, the issues of hunger and this and that, and that's all really important. But what's the underneath fabric of consciousness and our worldview that's actually creating these problems? So that's a piece of it, is the more we explore into our own consciousness, the more we can kind of get at the foundation of, oh, well, why isn't this working? And what is a world that works for all? Yeah. And if we truly, and the second piece, the bigger piece of worldview that would love, if everyone really got, both from a scientific and from an experiential point, that we're deeply interconnected. Our kind of tagline for IONS is the science that connects us, because it's looking at this realm of that me and you are not actually separate. And we can look at that we can look at that from telepathy, or we can look at that from mind matter interaction, or from healing, or from, there's all these interesting ways that you can approach these little signposts that oh, we're not all separate actually. But if we really knew that, then it wouldn't be a question of, oh, we have to help someone else, or, it becomes embodied, it becomes natural. You become identified, at this global perspective of, oh yeah, we have to take care of each other. We're like different fingers on the same hand. So that's kind of like the ultimate vision is learning deeper and deeper levels of our interconnectedness. So that's one piece of it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And you've been with IONS for about 5 years, like roughly, and a little bit over. And I'm sure I know that there's been changes in the organization and things that you guys are doing. What can you see from your standpoint? What can you see happening over the next 5 years at IONS and the studies that are taking place and how that's going to shift? Like what's going to happen in the next 5 years, if you had to kind of guess? Like, what are you guys going to be studying more of? What's going to be evolving more? What's the hot topics right now for you guys?
Nice. Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a question that I think our whole organization is actually really engaged in right now, because when it first came, it was a very novel idea to study consciousness, or what is that, and or even meditation or healing, or all of these things were still so new to actually be bringing this lens to it. And now it's getting out there, like I was mentioning earlier. So now it's like, okay, what's the next step? What's the next frontier? So there's some like base level that is, beginning to be covered, and other people taking it on. Like, what's the next frontier? So the question we're really asking is, what's the needle we can move? Because it's very exploratory. We have 7 scientists from, biology. People are looking at epigenetics. People are looking at mind-matter interaction. We've got Lauren Carpenter, who's the co-founder of Pixar, is now building new machines to be able to measure consciousness and healing energy. It's incredible. So we're exploring all of these things, and all of our 7 scientists are now asking, what's one thing that we can all focus on together to really move the needle? Yeah. And say, like, okay, we're going to focus directly on this. So they don't have that answer yet, but they're looking to do 3 to 5 year projects all together, which is just exciting because they've each been doing their own kind of projects within this field. So yeah, to be determined. But I think that there's so much more openness to this. And so yeah, we'll see, but I'm excited to see how the collaboration comes together. And
so more collaborative work, you're saying, just kind of like bring the studies together. And
because biology, psychology, physics, we have the whole spectrum. So, and I think that's the power too, to be able to work in this multidisciplinary realm towards one single question of, what can we answer here?
What can we answer? So as community engagement coordinator, like what are some of your current events and activities? Like when you talk about the community, is this like the local community, global, digital? Like what are you exactly working with?
Nice. Yeah. So we have a global community. We have over 180 community groups. So those are just local people who feel inspired and want to take some leadership in discovering deeper into the whole topic of noetics and consciousness.
Got it.
And so they meet, in their living rooms. They meet, and some of them have big groups of over 200 people who come to see presentations from scientists and practitioners. There's so there's just an incredible amount of information. They meet monthly, our community groups. And then, of course, we have our IONS conference that happens every 2 years, which is a great meeting place for
that's coming up, as I understand
community, which is coming up in July.
Amazing. I'm excited for it.
Of this year. So, and we have, so most of our communications and our blogs and our findings we send out online and on Facebook, and on, there's just this larger conversation that's happening. Yeah. And join in. If anyone's interested in finding out about community groups or maybe leading a community group, you can go to just community.noetic.org. There's more information.
Very cool. Yeah. So let's back up a little bit, because you spoke about the communities and the gatherings. So this event coming up in July, like it happens every 2 years, as I understand, the IONS conference. What's unique about it this year? What's going on? Where is it? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, the IONS conference is just, it's an amazing chance for people from all over the world to gather and to discover and kind of be in this exploration together, and also hear from the leading scientists and practitioners. And what's really exciting about this year that we haven't done in past years is we're going to have co-presenters. So we'll have a scientist and practitioner presenting on the same topic. So we'll have someone who talks about, here's my research into healing and biofields, and this is what I'm discovering. And then we'll have a healer on the stage to say, I've been doing healing work for the past 40 years, and here's my internal subjective experience. And so you really get to see both sides, and that both are very important. So that's going to be incredibly exciting to just get more and more synergy between these two perspectives, because it's been so separate. It's been so separated of oh, you have science and that
over here and
spirituality. So
we're talking about the same stuff here. Let's get them on the same stage. Yeah, that makes sense. Totally.
Yeah, so they'll be co-presenting, which will be great.
Cool.
And there'll be experiential and participatory events, breakouts, and it's really a one of a kind conference.
Who are some of your like main speakers this year? I mean, last time we had a lot of great speakers. Who are some of your featured speakers this time that people can expect to hear from?
Yeah, we've got Rick Sheldrake this year. Lynn McTaggart, who is great. She's the author of The Field. Dean Radin, who's one of our chief scientists. He's always a rock star.
Dean.
He's amazing. Yeah.
I love his presentations. Those are the best.
They're so funny. Because some of the science can get very technical, but it's a very good way. He has a funny, great way of making it accessible to everyone.
That's great.
We've got, Yvonne Cagle, who is a NASA astronaut.
Wow.
Actually, she's going to be with us. Trying to think of who else. There's just so many great. So
it's a good mix of science and spiritual talk, and it balances that out. And I feel like at a lot of events, you don't always have both the dimensions. There's usually one or more of the other. So this is going to be a nice mix, and I love the experiential part. That's really nice that you guys are doing that. That's great, and I'm going to be excited to be there myself.
Yes.
So how should people find out more about that? Where can they go? What's the website?
Definitely. So you can go to noetic.org.
Okay.
And you'll see the conference right on the front page, or you can go to noetic.org/conference, and it'll take you right to the page. I also want to highlight a couple ways people can participate, which we're excited. So I'm also helping with the Next Gen, which is kind of illuminating the next generation of noetic thinkers and scientists and researchers. And so this year we have the Next Gen Awards, which is we're going to be picking 3 people. We're currently in process of nominating. So I encourage you and anyone who is listening to this, you can nominate yourself or someone else who is kind of embodying these noetic and consciousness principles and bringing it out into the world, whether it be through business or art or music or science. But we really want to just illuminate and amplify. And so 3 people are going to be chosen, and they'll give a talk at the conference and a cash award and some other things. So we are very excited to kind of illuminate the next generation in that way. Yeah, I'm so very excited about that. And then we also have Spotlight Talks. So that's for any age to come and present their own work. It's like a 10-minute TED Talk style. Last year there was standing room only in the rooms where people are talking. So there's really this need and desire to both present and bring our own work forward, as well as hear from the community. What are we doing? Everyone has a part to play in this movement, in this evolution, in this consciousness movement. And so we all want to share, and we'll have some space for people to share their own ideas and collaborate and network at the conference. So
great. So this is in Oakland, California.
Yes, Oakland, California.
July 20th to the 23rd. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
You got it. Wonderful. Yeah, so it's downtown Oakland, and
nice.
There's pre-conferences and post-conferences, but the thing, it's going to be wonderful. And I know you're also going to be part of our creating our dance celebration.
Oh
So
yeah.
if you want to say a little bit about that, it was great last year to have you there.
That was, I mean, one of my highlights from 2 years ago when I did that here, we did it in Chicago for the Ions conference. When I looked out on the dance floor, I saw like a couple teenagers and I saw like people in their 70s dancing hard right next to each other. And that's
Yes.
like, there's so much like different backgrounds of people and cultures. It was just like it was a really, really nice, like eclectic community. And I was just like, wow, like we can all actually, like there's no borders there. Like not like, oh, this is not for me.
Totally.
Everybody was together and dancing and just really enjoy. And that to me personally gives me joy. So I'm excited to return to
Mm,
Ions and be a part of the celebration Saturday night. And
totally.
yeah, I can't wait.
And I love how you said that there's no borders, and that's also what we're trying to
Yeah.
create is illuminate the up and coming people who are coming into the field and also the people who've been around for 40, 50 years
Hmm.
deeply in this study, in this experience of inner science, of outer science, of looking at it all. So there's so much to learn and so much richness to be able
Great.
to exchange in this intergenerational movement. So yeah, I totally agree.
All right, Andrea Livingston, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you everyone for joining on another episode of Global Purpose Speaks. I am your host, DJ Taz Rashid, and this talk series is created in partnership with Global Purpose Movement. It's a collective of change makers convening and co-creating in the globe's shift towards a world that's working for everyone. And you can join the conversation at globalpurposemovement.com. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Yes.
Taz.